Hey YouTube, my name is Kirk, this is Oaken Ammo, and today I learned just how small starving Romanian soldiers were during the Cold War. This is a Romanian field jacket and pants, and it's supposed to be a large. Now, I don't know if Dimitri was a little tipsy when he packed and shipped this out from Romania, but I know child soldiers were common back in the day, so maybe this was a child's large on accident. That being said, the material on this stuff is quite nice, and the parts of me that are covered are fairly warm, even in these 30-40 degree temperatures. So, not all bad, I guess. And to go with the Romanian outfit, we have a Romanian AK. Nothing crazy, just a basic old Wasr, the workhorse of the US AK market for quite a few years at this point. So let's go ahead and get started. But before that, if you could subscribe, drop me a like, and leave me a comment about how, yeah, this is a child's large perhaps. The Automat Kalashnikov, or Automatic Kalashnikov, or thanks to the ATF, the Semi-Auto Kalashnikov. Possibly the only item, along with vodka, that Americans know comes out of Russia. Also, the only two real decent items that come out of Russia. Small arms and alcohol. That's what they could figure out during the USSR. Honestly, with production numbers over 100 million and 80 years of production, well, they better have gotten it right in all that time. That being said, the AKM that we all know and love today was not perfect when it initially came out. The AKM came out in 1959, almost a full 10 years after the original Type 1 AKs were put into service. The Type 1 AKs suffered from many issues, least of which was receiver warping and issues with production due to the difficulty of the new technology known as stamping back then. The Russians couldn't quite get it down right off the bat, even with the help from their German friends, so they reverted back to a milled design with the Type 2 and Type 3 AKs. These designs being a step back as far as the Russians were concerned due to added costs and added weight of the overall firearm. Only after essentially a full decade of research and testing did the Russians finally manage to figure out how the stamping worked and get it consistent enough to start mass producing the gun that we all love here. In those past 80 years, the AK has become the world's most prolific firearm, being found on every continent and, honestly, mostly every country you can think of. But the Russians did not do this alone. By spreading their manufacturing across their satellite states and sharing plans with allied countries such as Venezuela, Pakistan, and China, they were able to exponentially increase the amount of AKs being produced. Not only that, they were also able to gain great favor with many of these countries, helping them secure alliances and better deals in the future. Most, if not all of these countries, didn't just take the basic design that they were given and roll with it though. Many of them decided to make modifications or improvements that fit their needs better, or their customer needs, of course. Probably the most famous amongst these was the Chinese, choosing to, instead of using a 1mm receiver, just as the Wasr, they chose to go with a 1.5mm receiver, claiming that this would increase longevity, improve accuracy, all those sorts of topics. Whether that's actually true or not, I'm not entirely certain. That's fairly debatable. But other countries as well, such as the Bulgarians, decided to stick to the Type 3 AK, the milled AK. Even to this day, a lot of the contracts they put out to other countries are for those Type 3s, opting to not really produce the stamps nearly as much. Unfortunately, since so many countries decided to make these minor modifications, or sometimes major, parts interchangeability between AKs is questionable at best. Even if you have two AKs from different countries, items such as stocks, handguards, or even optics mounts can become quite difficult to interchange. Thankfully, the one thing that these countries all did decide to standardize on was magazines, whether it's Russian, Croatian, or Bulgarian. I personally have never had any major issues. Sometimes with the Yugo magazines or the Croatian magazines, a little bit of filing might be needed on the rear tang, but beyond that small modification, I've never heard of anybody having major issues. Hell, even the Yugoslavians, who never officially got the real technical data package from the Russians and had to reverse engineer the plans based off sketchy plans and guns that they got through Albania, if I'm not mistaken, managed to get it correct. That being said, speaking of the Yugoslav AKs, I have an unhealthy obsession with how much I hate their stock screw. Unlike basically every other stamped AK that accepts the stock through two little screws right here, they decided to go with a long screw that goes through the stock. So instead of having a nice little elegant solution with two small screws, they have this 10.5-inch abomination that goes through your entire stock, and I think it's just extremely excessive and very hodgepodged. That being said, the rifle grenade sight that a lot of those older M70s come with, the parts kits ones, is really based. And if they would sell modern M70s with that, I might actually consider buying one solely for that fact. So while you might have to bang on your overpriced Seneca or file it down quite a bit, at least your $10 mags work, if that makes you feel any better about that $600+ purchase for a very heavy, very proprietary rail system. That being said, I do love it, but I just can't spend that much money for a rail. Unfortunately, the Czechs had to go and be assholes and demand a proper bolt hold open, not even how the Yugos did it with their, crappy little bolt hold that releases when you pull the mag out. So, the VZ58 does not take standard pattern AK mags, which is honestly a majority of the reason why I don't have one. Now, I do have something a little bit unique that I'm sure most of you probably haven't seen. Specifically, these rounds here. These are Finnish M43 blanks. I'm not sure if that's going to be backwards on camera. I'm terribly sorry if it is. But unlike most standard blanks, these have this little tiny blue projectile at the end. And instead of being made of any sort of metal, this is actually a very lightweight wood. I'm assuming that it's just some sort of pine. But even though it does have a projectile, it does not mean that it will properly cycle in a gun. A blank firing adapter is still going to be needed to actually get it to cycle. And even then, I'm not sure how well that would work, seeing as, well, there is something that needs to go out of that barrel. Unless the blank firing adapter has a very pronounced hole, I imagine that these would get very jammed up inside of your barrel and lead to maybe actual issues. That being said, they did also make a similar version of this in 54R, which obviously there a blank firing adapter is not needed since it's bolt action. The most surprising fact with these, for me at least, is that they are non-corrosive, and considering that they have a 1982 head stamp, I did find that kind of surprising, and I'm glad. And that just means I don't need to clean my gun today, which makes me happy. I don't know how visible it will be on camera because we did shoot a few of these, but the projectiles, as far as we could tell, kind of just vaporized when they came out the barrel. You can see in the clip that's probably going right now that it did leave some larger chunks on that little target that we put out. So it's definitely not safe to obviously shoot at your friends. I mean, that's a terrible idea in general. So it's obviously not safe. And, I was concerned about like a potential ricochet even against the wood, but I was unable to find any solid pieces of it. Maybe shooting a different target that's not wood would have been a good idea, so I could help differentiate, but there was clearly no visible blue left behind anywhere. That being said, the charred wood smell after you shoot them is actually really nice and helped liven up the cold day. Now, I'm sure that if any of you play Tarkov, you are fully aware at the insane amount of AK variants that there are, from the basic AKM to the fully featured AKM SN. But what do all these additional letters mean? Are they there because Dimitri got drunk and just wanted to do more stamping? Not quite, but I like to imagine that's how they came about. But how do these also differ from the 100 series and beyond? Well, in reality, it's fairly simple. The S, for example, stands for skaldonoi, which basically just translates to folding. Interestingly enough, though, it doesn't dictate which direction it folds, whether it's a underfolding or a side folding style. It just means folding. The N instead translates to nasterny, which I couldn't really find a direct translation for. That seems to be a Russian exclusive word, but basically it means optics rail. So I guess if this was made by the Russians and was more of an AKM, not a Wasr, this would technically be an AKM-N since it has that side rail. In the same vein, a AKM-SN would be a folding variant. Whether it folds down or to the side, who knows, but it folds. There are also plenty of other letters such as UN or UB, which can be found on several of the AKS-74 U's, I guess. And honestly, the whole naming system is extremely confusing. I know my peanut brain gets confused by them and forgets them a lot. So I'm very certain that Potato Drunk Dimitri was asked to make a certain variant and ended up coming out with something completely different on accident. So I'm not surprised that they changed it to a little bit more simplified system with the 100 series. Fortunately, this naming system was solved with the introduction of the 100 series of AKs, the last major series that Mikhail Kalashnikov worked on. First introduced in 1994, it put an end to the absurd naming system and looked to simplify the manufacturing process of AKs by specifically standardizing as many parts as possible across the systems and trying to put a heavy emphasis on being able to build many different weapons with different calibers and different barrel lengths using as many standard features as possible. The program features originally, featured a total of 6 weapons, these being in a more traditional length and a paratrooper length, which was shorter, these often being used for mechanized troops or paratroopers as well, since, they're shoulder and they all had folding stocks anyways, but it just makes it a little bit easier. These, of course, coming in the 3 standard calibers that they used or sold, the 7.62x39, the 5.45, and the 5.56. Later on, they also threw in a 9x39 variant, but that only came in the paratrooper model, and since it was, if I'm not mistaken, just a VSS modernization program, it didn't share in any of the parts compatibility, so it's kind of just out there compared to everything else, which is why I don't really include it in the 100 series, personally at least. But through the standardization of the other rifles, they were able to get most of these parts to interchange from one caliber and barrel length to the next, oftentimes only requiring a new barrel, a new gas block, front sight post for the paratrooper versions. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember exactly, there's an old documentary that got deleted off of YouTube, but the bolt carrier was interchangeable, and all you would need to change for the different barrel lengths and calibers was the gas piston, which I find really fascinating because it really shows how dedicated they were to standardizing. Much in the same way that modern ARs are extremely simple to standardize and a lot of the parts are 100% compatible. But unfortunately, unlike many modern video games will have you believe, Battlefield 42, these parts are not interchangeable on the field. These are strictly manufacturing processes looking to make the guns both simpler, cheaper, and faster to mass produce. For decades on the US market, AKs have been regarded as cheap, unreliable, and just garbage guns. FUDs would often claim that they were bottom bin, and from rumors that I've heard, would basically give them away for free if you were buying something else. And to be fair, based on how import laws work in the US, many of these guns had to be almost completely rebuilt, or sometimes truly completely rebuilt when they first came in, oftentimes coming in as parts kits or having to have major modifications done to be able to actually work in a way that you want. Companies such as IO and Century have been known to botch an insane amount of parts kits when they first started coming into the country, having issues such as improperly set rivets or using cast front trunnions, with that second issue causing many of these guns to become impromptu hand grenades. That being said, in the past 15 or so years, Century has really got their stuff together, at least with the Wasrs. Some of their other US-made products, such as the Vishka, are still known to be questionable at best, straying from the, solid bulletproof design that the AKs derive from. That being said, Century does not make the cleanest AK around. There are many options from many other countries and companies that come in looking a lot cleaner and more polished. Not saying that these are bad or unreliable, of course, but for the money that you spend for it, especially nowadays, you don't get a cleaning rod, you don't really get a nice amount of magazines. Back in the day when these were dirt cheap, couple $100 guns, you would actually get a cleaning rod, you would see them come in with multiple magazines. Hell, you would get a little mag pouch and oiler bottle too. Hell, I've seen these come with bayonets and frogs for the bayonets as well. Thankfully, or unfortunately, whichever one, depends how much money you have. Those days are behind us, and the AK market is in a unique spot right now where everything is expensive and hard to get, but you can get it and it'll probably be reliable. That's all I had for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed the gun in the video, or the outfit. Oh, of course, and I know somebody's gonna get mad at me about the GP5 gas mask. No worries, that is a NATO filter on there. That is not the original asbestos-filled Ukrainian filter. I think that's where mine came from. So I'm not gonna die here. However fast asbestos kills you, I'm not certain. But have a good one, folks. I'll see you on the next one. And let me know, as per usual, if there's any suggestions or guns you would like to see me cover. I have access to quite a few things. And leave me a like and subscribe. Have a good one, folks.